Good morning. How's everyone this morning? So, no more physics. Now we can do the good stuff, right? So this is my friend Gese Dondil, you know, of course. He and I were brothers in a former life. So it's nice to be back, as always, especially in this beautiful new facility. I hope you all had a good year and that you're becoming better and better Buddhists and better scientists, and that the two are coming together. So just to give you an idea of what we're going to do today, and really going to spend the week thinking about disease and how our bodies respond to a disease. So we just want to go through an outline of what we're going to do this morning and today. So first we wanted to warm up a little bit. You guys know me, you know Tom a little bit, but we wanted to tell our stories of how the two of us who are old friends, how we got here, and we wanted you to think a little bit about your background and your past and how you got here. And then we have some slides to try and put, so you guys are in year 5 now, and we're trying to put year 5 biology in the context of the whole ETSI, all the other biology years we've done, and the neuroscience, and even a little bit of physics. So we have some slides to put it this week in a bigger context. Then we're going to kind of move from that into year 5 material. Although we've been talking about disease off and on for a long time, but we were going to start focusing and getting more specifics about disease. So the first thing we're going to start with today is trying to define disease. And of course, depending how you define disease, that's going to have a lot to do with how you approach the disease. Well, first of all, do you even think it's a disease? And second of all, how you define it will have a role in how you try and intervene and cure the disease. So these are things we'll be talking about across the week.
가리스기 열었잖아. 아니 지나 나사스나 가리질 문진 셔야지. 안지 값수수수라 문진 시다 민다 열었어. 아니 잡종 내가 망부지기 돈에 아니 나사 알게라 가리 지가이로만 지 나사 인다 마인다. 나사 이나 아니 컨디션 이보다 아니 나사 이보 시송나 아니 될 직접답도 탑시 가리가리 열었다. 근데 이게 니즈 망부시야 열었어. 이자 대중어도 아니 나사 가리에서 자는 니즈 대중랭이야레스.
And then for tonight, we'll have an assignment for you to think about some of the diseases that you've had yourself or loved ones. And then we'll have another exercise for you to do to think about how your body responds to diseases it's never seen before. But we'll talk more about that at the end of the morning session.
네, 다른기 낭종기 최대 네 나세 네 주시대다 자네 랑기 녀조 빈제 모션 버튼데기 내당 원에 중시하베 내당기 나로라 나사 칸데 중 나사 칸데스 나송 나사디 모다부터 나사 나루나라 나타다 대소 네 공부해야다 낭종해야다 대단 냠도 즉 나제기 넘버로 벳 땡안에 뭐마시부터 땡안에 진이 유매경이 나서던데 싸우던데 중국에 갑라 아니 수비용원에 될라 야렌 컨디스 주고도 아니 즉 탐징도 컨디스 주고도 야렌도 컨디스 주고도 근데 꼴라 아니 삼식 나제 낭종 지시디스.
And then this afternoon for labs, these are the times for labs for biology this week. 1:30 to 3, the first group. You guys are already divided. They're already divided into groups, right?
Maybe so. Number two, tanda desenka anile go.
Yeah. So the first group will come here. We're going to do the lab this afternoon here from 1:30 to 3, and the second group here from 3:30 to 5.
Number two, 동남 중인 유래다. 캐스케닝가 다 다리 내sunde 뒤주리 밀 디스케바요래. 그렇죠? 인공 잡로기 소된 이유봐. 소된 이유디 소된 당부 초야디 당부 체가제. 당부 체가 내 숨바부터 지디 소된 뒤링 심벌에 주체가. 그렇죠? 근데 숨번 내 숨도 체가부터 수제 발생제. 수제 발생대 뒤링 심벌에 주체가 이러라. 근데 숨도 체가 내 나와 봐도 소된 이유 들어와. 그렇죠? 제네 아니 다른 인공 잡기 아니 소된 일 것이 잡에 돈에 아니 라렌 기 제고도 빼야레스 디디 라렌 제고 빼서 다가라니스 이제 소된 것이 잡에서 시송돈에 마치 그림진 페로나스.
So this we're going to start some experiments this afternoon that will then continue the rest of the week, getting bacteria from our own bodies and from plant bodies.
제네 아주 제고 차시 빼다는 차샤비나 다리네 고수네 디 무투네 파 균생제 다가란 젠데제제 아니 두나지기 나로라 다가란다 데바유베 아니 다지 제고 두 스무트니 제아레스 앞에나 배선으로 슈비는 아주 루브랑라 이어되게기 루브랑라 차되게기 심부든데 수때 라 수때 안디 다지체 안디 젤루제단다 자제 안다지 제아레스 백테리아 라 다 백테리아는 좋다니 So
you guys know a little bit about me, right? So we've been together for almost 5 years. You know that I have 2 children, and now they are 15 and 21, 2 boys.
Ari Aisen Shugure, and Nabazu Mambuchi Shesu Yurita Tengalo, Mata Dingwe Lane, Mazu Leshatita, Devachin, Payore, Lucinanga. Is that any Kona la Puguni years, Puchik, Lojongata Chik, Yishu Katanis?
So they're both boys are the same height as me.
Kozuniga Puris, Puguniga Puris, Ya Supering Luchin and Kona the Yam Yamis.
When we walk, when the 3 of us walk around Atlanta, we look like the NBA team or something. Everybody's up.
And Konan Sunga, Yamdo Rujan, Tonjan and Pevekala, Dukte, oh, this is NBA, Ari Gayongi, symbol taking, Temotagan, some cigarettes.
So Gabriel, our older son Gabriel, is a student at Emory now. He's a college student, and he's studying the city of Atlanta, the kind of sociology and politics, history of Atlanta. That's his study.
부 gemba mingla Gabriel is kong talon yang gosu ne Emory turin lobjang nang lobjong nangeres korang lobjong naya ke sidi tongje ki chalu chatang da tongje den de ne da des pena ari kasa Atlanta tongje ro sha bina di ji jiso ki ne da bu ta di chalu chatang da jiso ki de dan de ne dan den de lobjong nangeres.
And Micah, he's only 15 and he studies basketball.
Which one is the Michael is? Kung lobjong ko na the symbol police jetan de nangiyoris.
And he's my height, but he's much bigger than I am. He just picks me up and throws me around like a stick.
Kung subuche ya tomen chanang pala de jigwa yes. Ne ya top shita chigres. Pala jida dus lela bujen indeshin pa kore jam
So you'll see that basketball is a theme for this year because me and my friend Tom, we met playing basketball.
How did you begin it?
Basketball is kind of a theme for this year because Tom and we met 33 years ago playing basketball.
Oh, 달랭 아주 디 롭지 제약이 주림 거래 나로라 싱볼 때문에 디 양내 동양이 주시 시작이랬어. 그래서나 안데 롭지 나야로와 톰 코나니 로스무스 카랑ዌ라 템 싱볼 때가 붙으셨어.
So I met Tom when I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, a little kid, and I was going to school, graduate school, studying PhD in biochemistry in Seattle, Washington. And I was just starting, and Tom was just finishing the same program, a PhD in biochemistry.
코나니 당와 토디 공론이 슈카라니 니저리체다니 신송. college ne sidugal torin loptane tensa che ne pje chungsi jensa men ro puchi ye sungen of seso ani lobjon na sa de biochemistry sidugal yengwe dan je jo debe ani lobsen ti don lobjon ngi yes kong lobsi lobjon na ya de si chi bodes.
So it's an amazing thing to think about that 33 years later, where do we meet again but here in Mundgod, teaching you biology. It's a beautiful thing.
No, dus nedan dus pa jabjo da dangji jamne pa te yonde ani losum so sum ge jela ani yanjo thuya da thobajun ma se thusa di kombena Mundgod ki kombena thuya da dieji lopti nyam du che ya tende ki thugre samya ge rewa khora da samlo khona na me gen sirwa dene chungsong.
Well, so for me, I still play basketball. I play basketball every Saturday. And one time I played with an NBA player. Ari, can you fix that to make it go full screen again? Thank you. You know how to do it? The lower right-hand corner right there. Yeah, thanks. So I too have two children. And my daughter is 30. She just got married. She's this tall. That tall. And she has a lot of hair. My son is this tall. He's Ari tall. And yes, he plays basketball. My daughter studies, they both are at college at University of North Carolina.
University of North Carolina
where Ari got his undergraduate degree. Right, so I am learning now about Ari's home and what he does in his work now, you know, all these years apart, 40 years apart.
University tagares ane na khong adanda tenga ari phage lobjon na wake up ki that koryu sa sa je yorba o tita je yogi nesu 망부지 단다 즉 쉐야다 정야다 저와 차기도.
Okay, while they do that, I'll tell you a little story. So, in the 30 years, is that okay? Yeah? Should I tell them a story now?
니들이 공 무무트네 숭야. 말이 빠르게 쉬고 왔다.
So in the 30 years since Ari and I played basketball together,
땡아 tat 아리다 코나니 땡아 토마토제 아니 싱볼 냠도 쩨백갑디 단다는 집별로 숨중회라와.
I started to do other things besides basketball.
디디 야 내가 싱볼 쩨바 찍고 많이 봐. 대마임게 내가 심바 아니 제야 고츠백갑이.
Okay. And one of the things I learned to love was storytelling and river rafting.
디디기 아니 싱글 제바다 냠도 양지 미제 나올라 아니 지 레드연색으로 제고 사와 아니 사와레 냠뇽 아니 사베 제네 아니 직디 중담 셰디스 동셰 그거도 동셰디 봐 맞으면 링 동셰기 봐 되네 이제 중담 셰지다 니버디 래프팅 시디 추 아니 가서래 추든데 추 앞에 또스 전부된데 많이 또스 잡고든데 라추 밥추든데 단데 잡고든데 나올라 추든데 땅지 려줘와 디체디스.
Have any of you gone river rafting?
River rafting 추 밥추든데 나올라 추땅지 아니 가주체야 직 탑지저와 근데 나뉴에스 나 no.
Yeah, there are many amazing rivers in the Himalaya.
This Himalaya 랑아주 남주인의 차주유대경기 Himalaya 리뷰 코레나 로라 근데기 추탄제 계신 드롭이나 도서 아니 추 밥주든데 냠가와 망우든 요리스.
But this place is the Grand Canyon in the United States. It's the opposite of the Himalaya. The Himalaya go up, Grand Canyon goes down.
아니 디 아리나로기 그랜드 캐니언 전에 또 방공 첨부 시우직 배 지제니도 유적인 게 유종 코레나로 또 방공 시우직이 아니 유 차데스 제 안디기 나로기 추 육주시레스 디 인간도 거바다 디 차루다부디 인간도 히말라야 나로기 아니 육주다 아니 내단도부디 그 독초로 차디요 그래서 히말라야 그 사자다 추르니나 사자 시우 통보로와 디 사자 두스마 딩을만 주지 말루요레스.
This is my favorite place on the river. This is 2 weeks on a trip. We see nobody. The only people we see are the people in these boats right here. These are our boats. And we hike up, and we're on a platform looking up the river 1,000 feet above the river, 300 meters above the river.
디 단다 죽수디기 귤람 그나로네 안 코랑기 믹세기 가부제세기 사제 밥진스 디 사제디 나로라 둔다니 스페 아니 투투 스탄즈 도야데 미소간 토고 말이시 미케지 토나 미 요현데 소레 소소 코난조 슈세데 차보 쩨제 투다데 샤니 요서레 데나레 미 통나 토걸 마도 심바 다시 소소소모도 통하지 요 말이시 아니 덴데캅라 데 차보제 안데네 투데 샤제 데네야도 제네 아니 야 리카 가서 도간 자진도 루요 디피제 how many meters did you say 300 meters 숨제 저기 토젤 요리스 마 데비나.
And on this trip, so scientists are storytellers, and scientists tell pictures in stories.
지단 체리버지나 지금 그래 시그러 버지 돈에 지금 중담 시행으로 야는 지금 내수도 버지 봐 시베종견도 버지 차디요레스 안디 시베 잡당기 귤럼디 안에 파르디 된데다 민다기 주이데 아니 제주시기요레스.
And this is a story about some things I love and some things we have to do to stay healthy.
안데 디기 디난데기 아니 내수디 나모들 파샤기 중담디 아니 지금네 코나 제야라 가부여야기 시직이스 아니네 된데 제야디기 수비 초된라 즉 대부탕부 무튼이 돼야 된다라 계속 편도 열에서 내가 열에서.
We're entering now. We're on the river in the canyon.
다 추코레가는 열에서.
What?
Yeah.
And this is me in the raft rowing, and this is my daughter and her boyfriend.
And
boyfriend.
Okay. The Kona is Chukanda, Chukorekan race, Sutubudual, Chukorekanse, Pajo de Korangi Pomoche, the Pomeo Karo is.
And this is Hermit Rapids. And this is the first time I rode the entire river. And it is amazing to me how my daughter trusted me.
The Kaptu de Koran Sumi Kaptu de the Jukju ki some pet Zozo Padu Korangi but Mutuje and Chutang base. And Tangin Zo Kalujuk and Koran is a Korangi Imaji Chila, the Kurim Rimbudi Nalola, and Chazan's Ruguyor, that cook pet Yamyon pet Kagare, Pumu pet Le Chazan Paral, Gassons, the Tonyon de pet Imazi Ruchta, Mosatia Ruchons.
Right? And so when you start, it's very calm, and then the river takes you, and it's committed, right?
Yes. Jen Tambu goes to the Jambo go to race. Then Parujilla, that not didn't look in that going say, Yamari, Jukju, any one years. And Jukju Kora bet Bapturo shoes, Bapturo shoes, and you do a Tagarangi, Shawan Doyaris.
Okay, so now we're into it. Next slide. Now we're into it.
That did Chukaranal, that did.
Okay, so what about this slide that's interesting? Right? So here we are in the rapids going like this, right? And there's more to come. But to my shock, I see upside down.
That day, Chukuranal race, and the Chuti, the Jambusi Jayomaris, bad Subushioris, but Tomea, Yapama, Centenioris. That is a Tendrici Kabla, and you do stay on the Page Mishmaji too. Good in London, Chapter Tonjos. But the number of cases.
Okay, so Pamela Bjorkman, Gesundheit. Pamela Bjorkman was on this trip. She teaches third year. Her husband is swimming right here. He's swimming.
From
this boat, out and swimming.
Pamela Bjorkman sending out the Lupti. What is she teaching?
She's teaching cells and genes.
Oh, Kong the Yang Tidik Laganisha and the Drepung the Rigzeta than the call Laganisha. And the Emory-Tibet Singing Dita Java charge yesterday. Lorusman Labios. Kong Pagi to the Congress. I'm going to go to Kongi, Choga de Conde to become the Jajev Gudusa.
So I'm going, So I pull my boat out to rescue my friends and their boat. So I leave, and it was this wave that flipped him, and I left to rescue.
Jenny, any Kodu Jig Godin Law, Jig Pagabet, and the Sosu Rangsung chair that on Job Jack and Jam Tondu. Oh, the some Jones. And it that Tagi the Mutuja, any Droya. This passage, any should do, but should be Kangla and Suji Pabja and Consul Javia, Rocha Chimis.
After I get off the river, my sister who was a professional river rafter guide. We talk on the phone.
Jenny and Kona, any Dene Pabja, any Netanzu Junior, then the Junga Digitan, Korangi Pinche Pomojius, Kong. Namju Dindel Celebrates, Tindic Trutan Dindel Celebrates, and Konda and Shabatone, Javashimis.
So, Tom, did you flip?
Did he Fontan the Ajagi, the Pontan is that the Trutan become to Kegis? Catch us on, can go to Losel as lessons?
No, but Kai did.
Pardon?
No, but Kai, the swimmer, did.
Okay.
Pamela's husband.
Namare Inaya Kai Godin Losons, the Ajidi, Kawashimbajiwa, or what?
So, Tom, we had a saying on the river. There are those who have flipped, and there are those who will flip.
Ale, Tandanetan the was Kira, Godin Lawman was, Shimba Golin Law was, in a Namjung and the Kajun, the Nejuris, Chunan and Rogenso, Nalone, Kashi Godin Law Sabata. Kashi Godin Loku never in the Yoris.
So this is like it is in science. Science is like this. We do experiments. We don't know how it's going to turn out. If you flip, you just get back in the boat. Keep going.
단대 영어 다가라 세리기 나올로 심주체 따지시는 로단디 된 영어 다가라는 빼따다 자요레스 따지 지기 누구였대 가리가리 종요 하고 말이스 안데네 집으로 골로 찌비는 골로 찌선선 삼샤요 말이스 야 다가라는 예사라는 야 랑제 야 로야레스.
Okay, so important lesson we learned on the river. An important lesson was dinner time, breakfast, lunch, every time at camp. This is a camp on the river, right? You sleep here in the tents. This is the kitchen. This is a bad picture, so let's get the next one, it's better. This is two more camps. Here's the camp here, camp there. So what do you see? You see a man walking to the bathroom. A man walking to the bathroom.
아니 근데 도스 드롭에 갑라 아니 쇼쇼게 닝구 공다 칼라사야게 참데 아니 사보게 그레스 아니 사보게 앞세 내단으로 통당 도스 통그레스 아니 단데 네파르나로 라코나니 질 계시다 허신지 폐기도 왔어 패서디 상주도 되게 가레스.
Very important.
뒤에 하장 계시브레스.
Buckets. Wash your hands, soap. Most important thing on the river to stay healthy.
근데 출루세 뇌도 왔어. 출루세 뇌제 대념도 관저 념도라 이제는 케요레스. 아니 양세 라고 주고요레스. 디 안다 덴데기 아니 출라 고토단지 루진 출루신 좀 도베갑라. 내가 가서래 저대 주부 대부 당부진 못은 대야라. 디 출라고 양세 쳐야지 내가 심을 쇼차디요레스.
Right? So the other thing we do here is we cook. This is cooking breakfast, right? Very important to wash your hands before you come back to cook and eat, right? Why is that? We think about why is that?
안단데 버리나 세버디 디 탑자레스. 안 탑자제니 칼라에 소소소 갑도 키니오 마이바 대창아 소우요레스. 이자 칼라마스 고나 녜라 상주 두간치 상주치 두간 말에 상주치 근데 라고지 장마 진취 아니 신에 칼라 라린 따그레스. 이 시우지는 같이 보레스. 이베 준생 칸데레스. 라. It's because we have to make sure that there are no bacteria or harmful bacteria on our body, including our hands, because that's what we use for bringing our food in.
Yes, and you would be surprised how many people rafting rivers forget that simple thing. They get very sick, and then their trip is horrible.
디네나 독대는 충중도지 라직 규모로지요. 이나 시우진는 같이 버렸어. 근데 주승 도스탄의 용계 다른 분이요. 아니 주도스네 당연히 용계 소이네 삼삼 아니 된대기 내가 치부임 같이라 규모 시우진be 내가데 제루레스. 근데 제베 튜쇼부터네 아니 나자데 나제 아니 배 아르마템 체제 아니 수수데베 예베네시 아니 무투제 투나운드야데서 삼샤는로가 자기요레스.
This is also the most important thing to prevent disease from going to patient in hospitals. They find that if doctors just forget to wash their hands, but it's the simplest thing, but if you don't do it, it causes the most problems, even today in Western hospitals, when doctors don't wash their hands in between patients.
대 아니 라고도스 트야디 독때는 즉 라디오로 휴지할 때는 시원한 가신 버리스. 다대 두줄 차샤비네 즉 아리익죄벨 롱버실 나나라. 즉 네번에 네버 나서두스 방건 줘야지 디 텐데 내다 디 제약을 내가디 투쇼침베 톤 중고레스 암지 젤라사고 시부지 톤에 아니 라고 줘야지 제네 네버지 때니 네버니마 따가두디 네번가메 나서디 네버심발 파피야 도시 벨루요레스.
Okay, so in conclusion,
that domjogins.
Okay, we told a story like scientists tell a story. And we came to a specific point.
다 인자 domjabina ngaju gochuksa rabudi chi rangi netyon dan jayne rangi yapjong ne dan jayne tungdam rabji shebris shebir de shebe shugu tamen duide an domji japje netyon chil bababris ati en seribe chitang dagararis toma ani chi gari chayo meyo gyu juni mebtone daji shebe kanshil an tamen duide di chi netyon rabji tubdyon rabji tola ma babje yungures.
And we tell the stories in pictures.
디 아니 라바도 체리 그서 지그 내다파 디시 제베캅라 나가 람치고 마이바 아니 딜라 아니 버리기 잡된 요베 토네 버리기 주네 시그리스.
So how many here have cameras, smartphones with cameras?
나 나머지 나로라 디 라토 카바 딜라 나로 파르체 랑디 요바 가즈이스.
Do you have, can you take pictures?
네 카바체 니 파르체랑 디 요베네 강마체 요르바 most of them have, yeah.
Great. So you can tell stories about your laboratories and what you see and what you infer.
Put it together in a story. 네 인자 남아서네 다가라 나 프로그레스 남아서 안다 다지 두스나에 두스캅라 버루버루 파르렌체 나 아니 파르도 수축지 제베 토네 슈구 디다 타제 아니 중담 시아이고레스 담시 시아이고레스.
So when you do your experiments in the laboratories, look for what we call the rough water. Okay?
제네 다제 칸 로베 캅라 다제 난기로와 다제 칸 로베 캅라 청라 도난제스디 추르지 차샤비나 추습사디 가와도 따에세 따쇼스 딱단 만두사지어와 내가 남로 만두사지어와 그래서 믹스에게 도난제세 당쇼스.
The places where people really don't know what is happening. Why is this working this way? Go for that.
페나 다제 규림다 이나 페나 솔레 추나는 동에는 보지 이나 출 로바 가실라 아니 도세사제디 뜻네 아니 대치베 있는 가리 연구위원회다 아니 지금 최마디세 사제 연구로와 대술 믹스에 믹스우체 파르텝체 랭고로 귤런체고로와 안디 내단디 남유기 즉 이라라시아기 내단다 만다버지 유디 안디 연구에 가르레스 전지번 이버당체 두신 로야레스 인자 따제 칼리 나we 칼리네 다가랑기 따조디 송고레스.
Right? Take your pictures of your data and tell your story.
제네 따제 제베갑기 아니 장도주도 뉴그로와 장도주도의 수세 빨래 안 빨래면 디토네 아니 심어솔레 아니 빠르게 규네 안디시 겨쇼스.
Okay, so one last thing about this picture. So this is Pamela right there. That's Kai. He's fine, right? Got back in the boat, he's fine. And his son Leif took over the oars going down this route.
다 빠르다다네 네 타마시비나 당기 두 고딩 로행기 아니 낭미지와 낭미디 다 슈고 양 꺄도 아니 줄간라 소네 로베 갑두레스 디 코란 초가치 파조디 아지체 디 군주 부드레스 다 땅야디 발라네 부디기스 렘브레스.
Yeah. So that's the end of this story, and now Pamela's here. I am here. Ari's here.
다다 디다 차베 종기 아니 죽디 디레스 레데 디네 무투네 디나를 차실 랭갱기 페멜라 데요레 콩 데요 아리 데요리스.
Yeah. Thank you.
도지세스.
I guess you might be thinking, you know, why are we spending time talking about stories and where we come from? So,
지난 남아서 캔사 가리나 체리라베리데 코난저 종시다 시기도 삼.
So one reason is, like Tom said, we're trying to get you to think that science really isn't any different than anything else, and that you can tell a science, you should be able to tell your science through a story, just like through a narrative, just like Tom told his story. That's one reason.
된다 처음 당 코난 얘기 로지도 동담도 시엔 셰송아 디셰야디기 초직 개선직디 체릭 대양 대단 문다와가 말이스. 체릭 대양 직 로하 내단 자샤로 시우직 남준 대화메데 시우직 로하지 뭐지 따주요 말이스. 거의 남샤 준댕 아란도 주요 유대기 내단다 아니 직송이 뭐지다 디파 셰베 이네 셰베 규림 대양 아란도 남준 직 중원디 셰기요와
Another reason is because, as His Holiness says, and as Buddhism says, we're all communities. The world is a community of organisms, humans, and other sentient beings. So it's important to know your stories, because one way to define community is the stories that makes up all the organisms in the room, so to speak.
The 속도지기 로주다 디낭로그 내주 중요하다 디세야디 디낭로그 총미 소소소소 나로그 중화다 내주 중화 대수수 조동 제제 디톤에 아니 속도지기 가서다 가서래 레왕 템베체로 그랬어.
So in biology, really biology is just another way of telling stories about communities. How do communities like ours come to be? What's our ecosystem? Right? What's our stories? So biology is an important part of these stories, right? And a lot of what we're going to talk about this week, disease, is part of the community also. So there's more to telling stories than just laughing. It's a way to show how we're all part of the same story.
디지도 되는 시즌에 있는 경우에 세리대요. 디단 직송 제제 고직 종어직 마시아 다 종어직의 제외 내도 아니 당자와 차야식 됐어. 배나 단당 아주 낮에 콜레케지 셰비나 낮에딩 아주 속도지다 저와 유배 내단지 됐어. 엔티 중루 중다다 대단 제역이 직탑시시단데 또 셰연도 만수 지 속도지기 단자와 유되게 내단 시기 위해서 도스pen 중직 셰연도 고지 중시에 제급도다가 안지 나와지 비르우시다 개무쇼야로 된지 지고지 미고 많이 봐. 될레게네 아니 지금 내가 심바직 자체에서 지다 내가 유명시 내가지 모두지야 두스레스.
So we just want to hear, just to help us in building this community, continuing to build this community. Tom and I wanted to hear a couple of your stories. Where did you come from, so that you wound up in the same community in the same room as us at this moment in time?
근데 이제 남아서의 속도들이 사실이스. And then 남아서 코난저기 아니 로주다 내수이파 송원나시 남아서기 로주다 아니 중화다 지소이네 안 속도들이 대단제 여기 내당이지 사실 자기 요레스. 근데 이제 남아서 나로는 가시지기 라랑기 중화 간에 임바다 아니 간데스 주니용바다 타멘디데 강간냠도 대냠도 소질라 아니 체리장이 내야기 내단된데디 간데지는 고주네 안된데 차송 근데 세야 되버스.
Anyone want to briefly tell us their story? Just
Let's take a vote. Let's take a vote. Everyone think about who they want to hear a story from.
딜랭아란즈 디자고스타 가서오레타 ölugos. ölugos이 마음에신 자고스. 남아서 관계는 남아서 from this group or all of
One here, one there.
디 소질을 삼다 디 소질을 차샤 디 나로는 마음에 돈에 수 중시하고 여성이 봤어 나로는 마음에 안에 퀘시게를 했으니 마음에 돈에 미직 담로지스 마음에 돈에
Who is it to be?
수시하고 했어 제 아니 때내 공부시하고다 나부터 나로는 미직 담로나스 sociologie ta turimda ande feka ngel gelaso
ngaro ngotren dodi shiwa ina asra ani chesa de kachi yorsana ani pe khamkige ani tholumbala ani chutu go jejas chani lol chiwares ani kap tedila ani anso lumba te karsana ani chetane ani nangchi taya da tene musigi phechembo maiza ani karseore da chungju kapsni ani nangchil teges tono hasu chembo tene lemasos
As for him, he's coming from eastern part of Tibet called Kham, within that the Tehor community or Tehor locality. He was born in 1982, and as for the community, as for the locality there, when he was very young, there weren't much going on concerning Buddhist culture, Buddhist studies, whatnot. So as for him, he didn't have particular interest in Buddhism for his early years.
Ani chungchung kaps da ani ta lumbati ani jakhabti ta jamisara ndi lockdown ani ta lockdown chua chimbares ta lockdown chine da lockdown thin chane da this lot is chimbo chadi zambala ani shini da lumbatil bha ji yangcha gi da ji ani gumbanon zu chua la so da ani nongchi pe pe shi chimbo ni ta ra didi ani pawa ma te so yin deba chi ani so so rangi ne tis deba tin yosare ani chen ani phai gi lumba gimbano trawachin longi deba is.
So given the fact that Tibet already, including Kham area of his, was already occupied by Chinese, so there were Chinese schools that they had to go, and so eventually he graduated from that school, and then with the passage of time, things about the culture, their indigenous culture, religion, kind of began to be taken into consideration, began to be began to be taken more seriously than before, and that's how he began to see facilities coming up around the community, and partly because of those facilities, and then partly with instigation, encouragement from the parents and relatives, he seemed, looking back, he seemed to have developed or seen some interest in Buddhism coming up. So that's how he ended up enrolling into a local monastery where he spent 2 years.
Anida ani gemano didi zambala shini ani nangchi gi da jangsa gi labra tewa chishwete ani desa so imbado tewa tanda lhabada tanda jagal tindi pechibo yamba tindi koto shini chungsos didi chune ani kapti dini anso di ti lumbati la ani jagal lumbal tishon jo tindi chengshon lo yo tindi lusi tasen dagi didi ta pechi monse tindi injire ta tinso do ani ngayo ti chene da ani longal ta tagaro kompajone ani Himalaya jini tindisne ta danda di geng konso kalite nda technology peche deli che kalito yo res entini jagalu matni solenjo res.
So it was during his 2 years of stint in the monastery that he began to hear about the great monastic universities like Sera, Gandhin and Drepung, and that they have been relocated in exile in India. And by that time it had already been it had already been in vogue, in practice, that people were taking the opportunity in sneaking out of their community into exile, going through similar and in some cases even more difficult situations, crossing the Himalayas. And he supposes that this is, up to this point, it is a common story background for most of the people here.
Ani dandele de gen jidu jolo jidu gja kojelen de leragi entini tandabada ani ta longo nishu samla tanadi gemba round de ani ta nanchi lamni chene tanda ani kaspaba ani giluju tendo simbares tido nyamde tanda chiri janch ani dodi samtewa is.
So the year he came into exile was 1998, and since then he has been here for almost now 20 years that he has pursued his studies up until now, and he has just started sitting in the all senior Geluk examination, and that's where I would conclude.
Thank you.
For all that.
Trashtele, Tangma Trashtele. Ani Ngaramang Jimmy Rapti, Ani Chumala Tenzin Rapti Lauri, Tandachi.
Greetings to everyone. His name is Jingme Rapten and his ordination name is Tenzin Rapten.
Tengaron Chisati Tada Ta Tungshan and Songhang Kundore per Shasho. Ane Taji Sajang Tosin the Shabinaji, me Yetong has to the Togong Sajiris. He's from the Chongun area. This I think an Amdo area in the eastern part. And in terms of the elevation, it is almost mile 4,000 meters above sea level. Tene Ngaron Namanda Chenaji, Tene Ngapawa, Tene Memba Chiri, Tindichen Ngaronga Dada, Teren Natsago God of Mingo Koyude and Ngaronga Tikonichi, Dongton Tuntunji Nason.
As per his family background, his father is a physician. And since the theme this year in biology is going to be disease, he wants to approach his story from that aspect.
Ane Jadane da Chimbu de member at the Chimson Chad, you're in Bawa Tingaron, low Carisagda, low Nihitsa, the thing about Jones race. So
his family background has a physician's background, and but his father passed away when he was 20.
The Nijadone, the Anepawa, Lobjon, or Soja Chimnon, Gutaji, not so Soja, Lobjon Treton Jura, Tindichan and Aron Tindichan and Main, the love your race. Then you might last.
Yeah, he has a feat in telling story. So in how he brags, it's what's causing them to laugh. So he says that his father made it particular that he also got similar education in that field, and one day.
Ane Nimaji Latini, Masodan Robag Sajarwala, and the Chen Tarumbo in any Miji Tajisha and Taji Tina Layung Dus.
So one day, since they belong to nomadic community, nomadic background, they happen to be spread out in wide expanse of region. So from one day, from long far, he saw one person coming, approaching their place by riding on a horse. So he was riding a horse, but didn't look that too hurry, kind of taking his time, but nonetheless approaching his place.
Anita, Mati did the Nang Di or what? Mati did Jadon Tawasri, and Tindichen, Tawa de Tashi Jamit, the Moshi Bajirisha, Maripopa Jami, Tashi Jami, Pacheta kilometer, some cheers and some drop Bajirisha.
So at that time he happened to be in the house, and he was already a monk at that time. And it turned out that the person who was approaching him riding on the horse happened to be a lay person that they knew, and who happened to live at a distance of about 30 kilometers from their place.
And then Namjani, also power helicopters, Missouri, Condrogo, which has something that power meeting at Eurochis.
So it turned out that the person who was coming happened to be the son of the family, and he had to tell the story that their father was not feeling well, was taken ill, and that he was requesting him to come and look at the.
And this is the son that was sort of taking his time, and it's okay.
Yeah. And then it was custom in their locality for people to approach doctors that way, and the doctors are obliged to go.
Nepal so huge jabroa, so you must on the co Julasio and the Natsa Risha. They so huge jabroa, and Coroje, Nanti, Nisan and Nimato, and the Che, Nagunda, Senagomato, Letomason, and Senago Leroa, and the Chasha.
So it turned out that when he went there, the father was in acute pain and had to do with some complication with the intestine. Oh yeah, it has something to do with
Appendix.
Maybe appendix. Yeah. He was in very acute pain.
Until the Tawasho Park Nunajab and the Chen. Then I told a Carison, mainly the Chachi Shirayo Marwa, and the Nepapa, Minkon and Roguenapaji, kilometer jats in the year, Tarumbure. That's a cook Yorwa. Takarichi against and the Hiratashi Haku Mandurwa, and then also the Jag Chimis, the Natsukarilla work. Chimis meteor, Chimis meteor, and Mary, and Tedaro, lots of your lava, lots of your Tosonyam treated to Louis.
So since they were in a very remote place, if they were to go to a regular hospital, that would take so much time. So he was desperate to try something. So then he happened to be carrying a medicine by the name of chimi. That's what the Chinese call a kind of a medicine. And then also he used some musk, combined them together and gave it to the person.
Jadon the Jumana Yoa, Jumala Inca Yoa, and that's Hako, Naronga Hako, Durwa, the rich and the Laza Namye Pingayori, Masuguti, Chilig Luxut and the year. Any Nichik Tawasho Umpar in the Chigdua, and that's young meteor, Chimises, and then the trainer comes to Pingayori, Jadon and Yam the Tibetan Lugai.
So somehow from the description, from his symptoms, it was quite apparent that the person had infection in the intestines, and also was developing strong fever. So with the combination together, he kind of figured out that it must have to do with infection in the intestine, and that this particular medicine from the Chinese medical system is known to be good for fever, treating fever, and then the deer musk is used for treating such infections in the intestines. So that kind of made him decide to kind of combine the two, and they gave it to him.
Tayanayong Jidong Minti Karisegori, Jigde Noshog me Segrova, Tinda Chadiora, getting out to Sojan, Ronjung, and the Tende Chadiora, Tibetan, the Hidan to hear somebody the counter, Nebatella, and the pins.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can see how I was experimenting with two different systems. One belongs to the allopathic system that the Chinese were using, whereas the other one is coming from the traditional system. And usually it is understood that it is not prescribed to kind of combine the two together. But that's what I did, and luckily the person got cured.
I United Jidon in Chigni, Yam News Hirachi Yomar, Jadon didn't member Lakin the Yerwa, and Tindichen and Yam News K Yomar, and Jimba Tapis Kamendo, Gada Tindichen and Yamani Sangata, like Day Concern Almundo, and Tindichen Tamatas.
So, although he did have certification to practice medicine, Tibetan medicine, but he lacked experience, and also he didn't think of any other means of treating it. And then the family was not letting him go, so they kept him for 2 days. So that's how it all turned out to good.
The family really appreciated you.
Nangmitsu Sharan Kwantai in the huge Kaujung Yoris. He's not saying, he's not affirming that that's what happened. He said, oh, might be.
아다 딘리체나 데 칸터 다른다 너와 수기지 아니 가르세고 따다당아서 근이다 내용들은 어쩌지 아니 딘리체에서 내가 너와 무사하게 되는 가서 자손 레가 요리데 아니 딘리체는 무사하게 되는데 거급라는 너 완전 용 딘리스
간스
아주 제동 다른 게 섭지도 좀 섭지는 데려도 다다 근이 더 내용을 두고 섭지들이도 송조 안에 무사하게 때 돈호체네 아주 자손 그 레가 요리는 너와 자리용
Oh, yeah. So, knowing that this year's theme in biology would be disease in general, and then infectious disease and whatnot. So, despite the fact that he had other obligations that would require him to stay away from the class, he somehow found a way to be in the class.
Great.
Yes.
I have one question. So one question. So what are the three medicines we just heard in this story?
Yes. Kongi ma tamshe na be nalola. Me sum chik tensons. Me sum de carreres. Lazi. Tene sumba. Okay. As per their calculation, they said one is the Chinese medicine, qi and then the other one is the deer mask, and then the third one is the combination of the three.
Ah, very smart. What's very smart? I have a follow-up question. I didn't think of that. But very smart. What's the fourth medicine?
Oh, laughter.
That's their medicine, right? What was the medicine for the patient and the family?
Kemishoyadi namasu kangali yoyagi mendires. Porque namisol peyagi mendi kishibati kares. Merda. Kagi ingire. La. Oh, yeah. As per his reading, he said that he obliged to their request by staying for as long as they wanted them.
Yeah.
And that served as a medicine.
Yes. Love.
Oh, tenderares. Kongidanda peson jabje nangmiki nanimani tegu yus labanasi an kongi nimani shugurwa. Di juni karten gudu slamna penjun sesemdi. Sesemdi and the
Desperately sick patient, no hope. The doctor appears. Now the patient feels loved and wants to get better. That's important too.
Never bet hache wutun dedi yoris. Anne tabshi juni mebchen amji nye yondu an amji peche. Sene never wutun de yoris. Ani ta tabshi juni mebchen tamata dude amji nyebre amji pene ani chik page 가면지요 나요도 아니 네베 아니 지금 암지 지금 운에 도구를 시에제 직 샤스 지금도 삼을 거였는데 펜진 버블을 제스는 게 칭버리스 디페 미스 게심버리스.
Yeah, thank you.
That was a very good and very long story.
대 종점적으로 셰바디 야고 쉬우다 링보 쉬우다.
So if you think about this story, you see that the power of stories, because it wasn't just about him and how he got here, but he brought in his experiences with disease and medicine and the world. And each of us are doing that, and each of us will bring that knowledge to this week and our learning. You see how important the stories are?
Is that a race? Ma tungdam shiri chen cheati, she would get him your say, Nengati, Tanda Kongi sung at the ne, Sevu Chasumas. Kongi sung at the tungdam in a con cage to go tungdam maris. Kongi shave di june, Chunga Kari Chungsung, Netan Kari Chungsung, Nazar del Tapshe Karinaso, to Sunsuas, Di June, as one which is Kodoro, Mambusuas. Then I sing as Mirin, and so Chungata, Chungda, this Sherry Chabina, this Shabby Di June, and Cheong Tone, and Kodolapa, and Shamde Tubiata, and Koto Geata, and the Tapshe Toya, the little Pendo in Greece.
And his story and experience of medicine and disease and illness has a value unto itself, but when he works with other students, they also bring their value and experience to different questions, and that makes the answer even richer, right? So the more scientists, the more students are working on the same question, the richer the answers are. And this is exactly what happens in the clinic. Doctors don't work by themselves. They work on diseases in what they call rounds, or groups of doctors who think about disease based on all their different stories and experiences, and then they come up with identification, a diagnosis, and a potential cure.
And the Kongi Korangi Musu Yondo and Chungwe Tungdam the Sumbaris. The Sung Yondi, the Koranjigo Tungjil Madeni, Miam do She, and any Shabasu, the Yaland of Chiton, Chibokuata, Lenteata, and Rangi Yamyon Su, Bunyo, and the day Tony Tungdi. Tangina si Kajan of Jil Made, Kochu Shuta, Namjudo, Net Mangush Chang, Chubusas. Then I see Seri Naloli, Seri Chetan, Chibujaris, but another data and Seri Chetan Chashabine, Amji Yonje, and Coretta, Tagaran touch of the Maris. Pena the Mangan Mushi, and then Nalola, never Tagadu Dugala, Amji goes around cigarettes and Koran to Tagon Grace. Corridor Capula Koran, and Shibati, Nezu Chumati, Nenji Lerota, the Zunium Dola Pasherich, and Shebetone, Penzutazi Shebetone, and Yamno Sherich, Ujene, and Yamru Tone, and some Zu to Duje, the Chodum Jabetone, and Lalenta Ganduyoris. Is a Nazu Teri Tajisatandine, Tagararis, the Tajik Kanla Suyon, and Michi Chepatage, Shamasha, Chik, Niche, Sumche. So, Nitun Karjun of the Supung, Ducheni, and Chiongi Shejadi Chupushu Chadugris.
So, His Holiness, so now we want to think about this, our community, Emory-Tibet Science Initiative.
Tangazutanda, Data Daja, and the Su, and Emorita Buggy, Terry Lerimjera, Tichol Pa Punche, is shaking.
And His Holiness had a vision. What if we bring together these two communities, the West and the science, the East and the Tibetan Buddhism? What if we bring these two communities together? Again, we will get a richer conversation.
The Consochogi, Puyan Rimbu, Kongshita, Chanang Tone, Karikombashe is Lamna, and the Sharchogi, Nanchuk Zube, and the Shege Ritan, Russia, Sujung Shege and no choke is heading to be Shege Nibuti, and those Kajan Susu Luteba Maima, Sunyamdo, to Tote Cheche, to Namyamdo, and Karsore, language and Shubin, and Kariongres, those in the Compashe, Chanash.
But not just a conversation, right? Conversation's nice, and it makes us feel better, and it can give us new ideas, but when we talked to His Holiness about his idea originally, one of his big ideas was maybe if we bring these two communities together, we can think about diseases specifically, diseases of the mind, diseases of the body, differently, and maybe come up with some new ways to relieve suffering.
And Consochogi, those Puyan which Hananja, they are the neg Sujung, need Su Yamdo, Su Yamdo, Cursor of Jigla Kerni, Penzu language, there is some gi. And the Choyata, Tagarangi, and the Zorwaki, concert in the Jayomaris. The day Yamaruche, Yam German language have tea, June, and Naranzu, Semdan Luki, Dunge, Semdan Luki, Nasa, Jayaki, Karin, Tapshi, Sawa, in the Toyata, Tapshi, Nale, and Chua in the Toyaki, those Tara mixed Tuche, Compassionis.
So after tea, we'll talk about how we define disease, but I think we'll all agree, no matter how we define disease in whatever culture, that part of disease is suffering, right? And Buddhism and modern science are both about relieving suffering.
저는 소재 발생 शु고 아주야 좀 연도 아닌 나서서는 간디실 원진샤고래 센티 직생이 당에 식도지 바시대야 탑시치기 이나야디 근데 지기 규름만로 공네 아주 관계 투몬도 켈래야지라 나서슬랍디 지기 갑종기 리슌다 근데 따따민다 가리 이밀마 되바 제용기 톤네 투몬도 나서슬랍디 동행지기 랑신질 원진시기 직바레스 지규레스 아니 세리기나레 나우저이나레 이게 아니 지게 가서 타도 기미유티 동에 세야 탑람지레스.
So this isn't just a game, it's not just for fun. There's possibilities here. So you are the young minds who are putting these things together, these communities together in your mind, and you may indeed come up with some new ways of thinking about disease that can relieve suffering. You. So it's not just a game, it's not just talking, right? There's possibilities here where as you become scientists, some of you are already becoming scientists, that you may come up with some of these new ways to relieve suffering yourselves. That's I think His Holiness's ultimate hope.
이상 아주 도스 루루 제야 되지 기타 루루 제톱스지다 파주 담시 제톱스점 되게 지기 엔드기야기 내나지 말이스 아주 도스 루루 제 파주 셰레 제 고토베레 제디 규네 캐난조랑 테베 아니 디 레림디나 냠슈 난겐 소기 규라 고도 사와지 지기 똑세 사와 중네 디 규네 지 나살라 지 탑시 제단으로 보지기 림바 땡암메 되긴시다 땡암마 중무든데 사와든데 되미세 말이스 이상 아주 문에랑 아직 가서 카요라요 근데 아직다 안저 유튜브에 레자지 쇼디야리스.
So what Tom and I want to do now is before tea just kind of put what we're going to do this week in the context of ETSI, what you've been doing so far over the last 5 years in general.
제니 데니 단다 달랭기 로이기 롭센트 서울에 주시조디 나자다 데다 제요기 내단 차기요레 이나야 다리 롱아바 인사 딩웰라 로시기 은로존 제요레 이제 디체브 대수 지 가수랑 좀 찍게 갑종을 샤베토네 안 단데디 지 믹스에기 데와타네 코지게 갑기 가수레 델 카리 유메기 돌아 숭기스.
So before we think about neuroscience and biology, which overlap and are clearly connected, we'd like you to think a little bit about this past week, about physics, what you were learning in physics over the last few years. Do you see any connections between physics and the biology that you've learned already?
지다 경외 세리다 원자 세리니 바로 데와 카리메가 다 초그레 엔데와 갈가섬 기 담보 요레스 대점도 마세 단다 넘버스 링외기 다 캐서네 캐서 30 조베 아니 딩응기 둘다지 나로라 아니 응외감 세리 장나 임바스 이상 응외감 세리 돌라 아니 삼시제야다 디제 고급 조비사 디 라당시 야비토네 아니 디다 경외 세리 이 버룰라 응외감다 경외 세리 버룰라 데와 가르도 텔레 공부시로 체스 가르도 스코니 버룰라 지 투가로 간데스도스 응외감 세리다 경외 세리 이 버룰라 데와 가리 용사리스 라 in physics they deal with particles and so deals with very micro level particles and macro level things and they speak of how they are connected, how they bind together, etc. So there seems to be a connection along those lines.
So when you think about the living staircase, right? We start with atoms, right? And then we get to molecules, and then we get to cells like that, right? So physics is starting at the very beginning of that, right?
Penang azu dende de kengwen seri nololine living staircase labdu ane seso ke temges gyurba chikda yana chik kasore kengwen ke temges ro kengwen ani charimne jene ya chikza niza jebtone ani kengwen ki kaso netan rakwadende stubiyo ro oti netan rodanti ani ya ngokam seri nololine chik duchen chamushu chik netan shebtone di somshi jene shimba kan studanti shegi yusa ni boron jawa tuas.
So all of biology is made of physics in a way, right? All of biology is made of the particles that you're learning about in physics.
경외 세력이 요새 강가 아니 저기 처수 된데 접샤고 됐어. 경외 세력이 요새 강가 아니 처수 된데 접샤고 그래. 처수 돼서 아니 뉘다 된데 돈이 쉐비나 아니 welcome 세력다 하자는 데가 좀 차디어 됐어.
Other connections.
아니 디마임베 아니 welcome 세력다 경외 세력이 바로기 제두 투조 대화 connection. 라
나 경우 세력들이랑 저거로 뉴바권이 안 경우 다 이만에 용다 나 드네 드셔시 제도 경우 디나시안 세력 응검 피지 응검 세력이랑 뉴바디 딕시 제와 좀 보시오도 디니 바라
one area that they could we can think of a connection between the two is the topic of energy. Energy. Yes, energy is what gets things going, and in both biology and physics, energy is a big part.
Yeah, so far, just to review what we have so far, two very good ideas. Particles that underlie everything, and energy that those particles use or create to underlie everything else. So those are kind of the central themes of biology and physics.
배 야부초서 단다 디바루기 경외 세리다 응검 세리 바루기 대화 컨디션 여르신 컨디션 나로네 네드 니 랭소 니 직디 두텐 코드레스 두텐 코드 세디가라 지금 무수로 가리르지네 소중고 아니 타면 뒤에 좀씩 주베 시림 내단 차기 여르 디톨 차잖아 아니 응검 세리다 경외 세리 니가 나나 대화 여르스 디 쇼고데 에너지 센 뉴베 콜 가면 소소 뉴베디 아니 두텐기 쩨베 아니 지금 뭐 가리르지네 코 지금 가리나 소소 레르 쇼야기 레르 슈크주겐기 아니 가서 찾인데레스 아니 대화 전부 다 소소
These ideas are so central to life that the Buddhist scholars were talking about things like this, Lung, energy, and particles, long before Western scientists, right?
Tanda the particles yani do you think do you chamuda ani sok chamuda ane tezule lukugengi nubas chen keje she ndu Tibet nganzu misegi nedang misegi da kasore da nedang 나로네 다 시림 차기 열었어. 그 닝부로 차기 열었어. 코베트 가서다 센트럴 시티관을 의는 얘기 내다지. 코베 의주르 차네. 심바도 강가 뒤에 예연전에 뒤에 차기 열었어. 뒤내수디 아니 세리잠 마임바 아니 나주 남초역 나로리네 아니 대소 실샤베 토네 아니 담셰나야다 데셰나야디 나사네 젠로 동담마 보면네 아니 예베제레스.
Other connections?
디마임베 아니 응검세리다 경외세리 버를 자와이도베스.
기 경외지임베이나 코 간조파 주디시고라 주디데라 하징게 라리베 뒤뒤은데 바츠단데 팔반 타투소는 응검게 다천제르 바스고 조바토니 경외데 줍는 로까지 준로에메다 데네지바 타투에데 경데 응검라 두에지오라 디데 경외니 바로라 먼저 뒤용 그 차시야다야나 경외도 좀 뒤용 가지고 준 거면 봐 다도야 등금 선제를 받더니 타조 최고지요라 대조 하장 저 전부 넣었어.
One area that he sees connection between the two is the time factor.
Time.
Yeah, time. But as the question quite often arises as to how and when they originate, and this is what is approached both by physics and biology.
Okay, yeah, very good. So this idea of when things happen and when they originate and moving across time.
tenera tizuda jawashida yore tuyugi joshidiyang ani ngogam serita kengo seri barul jawa tenden yore skarides na joshido nedendo garijida jawatagi yuneti khande chungsha katu chungsha ani chungwa nesungde tizugi jurim dinanglola ani pejuru khande rugudo pejudi gari kegido tende nejudi niga nam jawa chagi yore.
And biology, remember, biology focuses on kind of three kinds of time, right? Daily time, so there are daily cycles, things that we go through every day. We call them circadian time, so daily time.
근데 경우 체리를 찾아비나 경은 세를 차샤위는 뒤즈의 제베 내단으로 숨 뒤즈 nguyên 진단다고 숨 제베 돈에 아니 뒤다 이제 차기요레 뒤식디 니리 소와드레스 니리 뒤즈드레스 그래서 니리 뒤즈드 나올라 아니 류기 주와도 단다고 딜랑아주 circadian 시기도 circadian rhythm스니 둔진 콜로스니 경의단 경의 류브랑 나올기 둔진 콜로스니 류브랑기 아니 즉 가서도 뒤즈도야 다 인생다 대소 녜된 지경기 아니 차시 대소 단대와 유튜브들라 둔진 콜로야는 둔진 추즈스라기여디 아니 뒤즈기 찍레스.
So we talk about daily time, and then we talk about developmental time, like last year where we learned about time across development, from sperm and egg to development to a full organism to organisms like you to getting older to older and then finally dying. So that's developmental time.
Tene dügi neden nibadi ani salongda debe. Da salongda sarbe gebeda debe dürimdiresti. An tutma ngazu nani lol kaso lobjon chebeneshi ji miribjina mi perimdi toma ani ji kamdudo tenejinen gozune anti dügi jundaga trela kandes peji jogudo sarim kandes chigudo 주고 아니 제 경외 배 차상질 봐 주변이 간지도 또 세다야죠. 어디 아니 developmental time 시디 살롱데 데베티즈.
And then finally in biology we think about evolutionary time, right? So time, many generations since the beginning of time, we evolve. Like we talked about the Tibetans evolving to be adapted to high altitude when the first Tibetans moved to the Himalayas, like that. So daily time, developmental time, and evolutionary time. 3 kinds of time we think about in biology. A little bit different than physics, but still related.
Then do 가서 우리 nguyên 진서 우리 뒤단 데베 내다 숨바디 evolutionary time. So do pegu the 데베 뒤즈. 뒤즈 준다링 부지기 내단기 복합기 아니 pegu 페림다 페신도 유런도 다지 시기요레스. 디직 뒤즈 준다링 부시부지기 아니 난기 내단지 시기요레. 빼나 페리를 차샤위는 페미 리그조 아니 지 사토서 시우질라 아니 당보 내단 칸이 레바다 레바네 송데 아니 뒤즈 준다가 틀라 아니 컨데스니 파기 내단 멘다바텔라 아니 tunjur 테브레스니 내단티 아니 페주드 데베 뒤즈데스 이자 아니레 뒤즈 아니 차르페기 뒤즈 아니 페주 뒤즈신 숨도아스.
So very good. Particles, energy, time, what else?
Today is tagi 뒤즈디 텐데나 니가게 데와타사게 아니 네 주시시그레스 안직 뒤라파 데와타나노부디 경외다 감세르티스 빈다멘다레스 텐데 is 땅아조 군인이 버르고 데와 요스디 맞은 문진 제샤부디 아니 뒤첸 거체 속참의 거체 텐데 뉴베 거체 텐데 뒤스 거리바스 데마임베 주시 심바데네 토네 군인이 버르 데와카 요벤도스 라 니가 했지 벌어?
단도 어스 간데 차거스나 단도 노파노로 시바이나 어데 단도 맞아 로중 그 단테 마인 바이 그니 차오다 로중 그 자바이나 때는 가서 쟁원을 자바이나 스네 로중 그 여비기 신체 다 가서로 신비 매체 단 야다 단 몸진도 든지 콜레양 캐니 파 저진도스 테 마인 바 단도 가서 어데 니 어기 주는 가서 쟁원을 자바이나 나사 저여라 나자 땡 가서 쥐었다 아니 거지 따서도 저 건거나 너어든 저 수치모지 너그 주네 띵노 네치 모부지 또가 인순자 쟁어다네 가서 ngọn이 그 빨아 저 수치모도스.
So one area of connection could be light. Yeah, light takes central role in light. When we think of the natural light, it has a very significant role in how things behave.
Yeah, light is kind of both particles and energy, right? And without light on Earth, without sunlight, nothing else really happens.
대좀도 마세 왜디 초진의 삼단나 뒤이베서로 뒤체이베서로 초진의 삼단나 뉴바이베서로 제니 그 니게기 즉 시튼도 야나 즉 니가기 투몬도 죽사기 아니 가서오래 신도로 부지라 차디요리스.
So very good. So you could the point here is to always remember that physics isn't separate from biology and biology isn't separate from neuroscience. We separate those artificially to study them, but of course they're all connected. So as we are going through this week, we want to keep thinking about all these things connected.
Isa Kyangwen Seri, the Ngogam Seri, the Wanza Seri, the Sukanga, Hoptical Tayo, Dugalaji Lobse, Lobjon, local logas, Tuzu, the Lohache, Chigadu, Chilocaro Mendo, Petcor and Jawame, and Lohar Mendo, some Yangayor, the Tundal in the Jin Maris. Ngazu Lobsen to Spa, Yawache, and Tuzu, Lohache, being Lohata and Chadi, Koji Juputibu Yongacheto, the Konzo and Tawayu, Shiduzula, Lobjon Chair, Juputibu Yongacheto, Remato, Juputibu Yongacheto, and Journey, Soshabe, and Yawachi Demato, Tenla, Tendegi, Kate Tang to Yawachi Maris. Is that the some look Covetone, Mazu Kari, Lobjon Chigi, and the Tsuchik, Penzu, and Javakari, Yosaris, and Compashidandi.
Of course, you can often see these connections hidden in the language and the etymology of where words come from, right? So I don't know what it is in Tibetan, but in English, the word physics and the word physician or doctor, you can see are almost identical. So clearly, people have kind of intuitively understood through history that this idea of studying diseases and biology is very connected to physics.
Desmond Masse, Tendegi, Mutunguela, Tendegi, Yawa Soso Cherry Meba, and the Java Nezudi, Nanzu Tonaji Chebina, Namjune, Pejucha, Tanya Dizonole, the Tanya Dizonole, but baby suit in Sunday, such baby suit, Nezudizo Hazore. Nedunchigi was sort of motor Jungres, Kanzonachana. Penatagaran Shashabina, physics, the Ngogam Seriva, physicians, the Amjiris. Tata Kuni Tikoran, Yondan, Tata, Kalakanzan, Tikoran Chiburet was. Authentic on Tiny Pejusan, Tony, Namazutonan Chebina, Tanya Koreton, Katagres, Jigding, Nedandi, Chikazunga, Cheche, Yawache, Shabi, Netandala, Tendegi, Kater, Town Meba, Town to Meba, and Penjun Jedi Yabati, Tendegi Tony, and Katagres.
Okay, so we should have fun this week. Let's take a break for tea and come back at 9:45, okay?
Thank you.